And now we're on Daf Chav Zayin Amid Beis. Vayoaniyim is Baishim is Kiddush Yakol Motziim Beklicha, which is a kind of a coffin of a basic. So I mean, they quoted Shalanim. We'll see what it's made of in a minute. Those who died from intestinal disorders had a smell. So in order to offset the foul odor, they used to burn incense underneath them. Now we're talking about the live people. Before I was vacillating back and forth. Whose covet are we worried about? Is it the deceased or it's our? I think basically it's our covet. In this case, the Aniyim, and in this case, it's the Choli Me'ayim. Could you imagine? They're taking out this Choli Me'ayim, and that they're burning this incense in order to offset the foul odor. That was a busha for the Choli Me'ayim. Everybody would get the mugmar underneath the body, even if he wasn't someone who suffered from intestinal disorders. If they kvodim shel Choli Me'ayim, chayim. Any keli that came in contact with a woman and then she died, we would assume, not assume. Let's say we know that she's in nida. We don't assume anything. Let's say we know she was in nida and she died while she was in nida. She hadn't gone to the mikvah, so she's mitami the kelim. So now we have to be matbil the kelim and put him into a mikvah to be mitar. But as a result, you need those chayos v'spaishos. I mean, this is a public demonstration of what we have to do for these kelim because the tumas nida. So the nidos felt very uncomfortable in that. So therefore, it's kiddush yumadbilan al gabi kol hanoshim. They quote him shall nidos chayos. So in order that these nidos who are alive should not feel ashamed, and they should not be sensitive to the fact that look what they're doing with all the kelim that came in contact with the nida. This we want to keep low key. So therefore, we'll make it into a standard requirement that in all cases of a woman who dies, we'll take the kelim to the mikvah. Whether or not they were nidos is irrelevant. Same idea, Gabi Zav and Mason. They would take the utensils of the Zav who died, and they would be matbil them. For Yuzavin Chaim is Baishim, is Kiddushu matbil and Agabi Akol, Mibnei Kvodom Shel Zavin Chaim. It is so expensive to bury the dead that the poor people would just run away from it. In other words, there were relatives that should have been involved in the kfura, but they saw what an amazing expense it would cost. They flew the coop. They weren't around to bury the dead. Remember, I told you before, we're going to be amazed by Rabbi Gamliel. He left the tzava before he died, that Yatza B'klei Fishtan, that he should be buried in linen garments. Let's just see what he says over here. At the time of his death, Rabbi Gamliel ordered that he be dressed in inexpensive shrouds of plain linen. If you know anything about the Gerach Hasidim, they're into these kind of takanos. We don't want to spend too much money because the Aniyim don't have that. The people, as a matter of commensurating or empathizing with the Avel, they would also go out in linen garments. We bury the dead in something very inexpensive. It's worth a zuz, one single zuz. A zuz is also worth something because you can buy a goat for 2 zuz. So for 1 zuz, you get half a goat. That's, a goat today sells for a couple thousand. And what is sarda? Sarda is something that we call canvas, very inexpensive. In the case of Chol Moed, we don't want to encourage people to violate the Isur Hesped by leaving the body outside in the public. But if the deceased is a Talmud Chacham, then even on Chol Moed, we will eulogize him publicly. The Kolshkein Chanukah Upurim, and certainly if the Talmud Chacham dies on the Chanukah Upurim, we're going to have a Spedim, because Chanukah and Purim are one level below Chol Moed. Chol Moed is Mikra Kodesh, is Doraisa. Chanukah and Purim is D'Rabbanan. Even though we're advocating eulogies on Chol Moed, in the case of the Talmud Chacham, that's only the eulogy that takes place in the Beit Halavayot, right there in the presence of the dead. And is that so? Rav Kana Safti Rav Zvid min Ardoy b'fum Nara. So Rav Zvid died in Narda, and Rav Kahana delivered a eulogy in Fum Nara, and it was Chol Moed. So we see clearly that even Shalom B'Fanav on Chol Moed, there's a heter for Talmud Chacham, in the case of the death of the Talmud Chacham, to be maspid. Amar Papa Yom Shmuah, who came B'Fanav them. What happened was that Rav Zvid died in Arda. I'm sorry. Wait, let me just get this. Yeah, I think I got it right. And Rav Kahana didn't hear about it in a place called Pum Nara. There was a distance and they didn't have communications like we have today. When he found out about it might have been 30 days after Rav Zvid's death. Who knows? But that's called the Yom HaShvuah, and the Yom HaShvuah is like Kibbur Fanav. Amar Ula, Hesped al Lev. Hesped really means, literally, if you go to the etymology in the Bible of the word Hesped, you'll see it means beating your heart. Ichsiv, and he proves this from Pasuk Yeshayahu Navi, Al Shadaim Sofdim. Sofdim means they beat down. Tipuach is another word that we see in Tanakh, and that refers to biyad. Biyad means that they used to start clapping their hands. So the first thing they did was beat their breasts, and then they would clap their hands. And the third thing they would do is kilus berega. Kilus here does not mean what it usually means. It means to be meshabeach, but rather kilus means to stamp. And they would stamp down with the foot. So that's what's going on over here. There are three things going on at the same time. They're beating their breasts, they're clapping with their hands, and they're stomping with their feet. All this as an expression of mourning. But we see clearly that the etymology of the word softim or hespedim is to beat the breast. A sandal is firmly attached to the ground, but a middle is not. It's only wrapped around towards the top of the shoe with straps around you. And if you're going to start stomping wearing a middle, then what might happen is that the middle is going to go flying off and you'll be ending up barefoot. It's very dangerous to walk around barefoot. What happens if you're sitting Shiva Nebuch and you want to tell the Menachem, my buddies, I appreciate that you came, but enough is enough. It's time to go. With regard to Nichum Avelim and Avelis in general, In the base of Ovel, it's the Ovel who takes the initiative. You're not allowed to even start speaking technically until the Ovel starts speaking. And when the Ovel gets to the point where he wants you to go, he's not going to say that explicitly. But what he will do is Na'anea Barosha. He he'll shake his head. You did what you did. You comforted me. Now it's time to go. Shuv ein menachem menachem leishev etz. Shuv means once he nodded, the Ovel nodded in the direction of the Menachem, indicating time for you to go, then he's no longer permitted to sit next to him. In two cases, we exempt a person from standing in front of the Nasi. One is a chola, because the fact that the chola does not get up out of his bed, that's not in any way a pgia in kvod hanasi. He's not being pogea of hanasi. So again, Rabbi said, what we're saying here is that anyone who remains sitting where he is when the Nasi comes in, but it's not an affront to the covenant Nasi, then he doesn't have to get up. A chola. He's bedridden. He's not going to get out of bed in honor and for the sake of fulfilling a mitzvah in Nasi. And the Nasi is not going to be insulted. He understands full well, why the chola is not getting up. The same thing in the case of another. V'yam Rabbi Yochanan, lakol omer lahem shvu chutz me'avel v'chola. Now, I'm not sure exactly who is saying shvu, but what's going on is the people stood up for the Nasi, and somebody's going to say shvu. Now it's time for you to sit down. Probably the Nasi himself. Does anybody say anything? He doesn't say anything. But the Ovel and a Chola, for that matter, are not required to stand up, as we saw before. So therefore, if let's say they stood up, they're allowed to sit down without any permission because they didn't have to stand up to begin with. But the rest of Klal Yisrael are required to stand up for the Nasi. And here we had a kula that an Ovel and a Chola, if they voluntarily stand up for the Nasi, which I'm not sure if that's recommended, but if they did so, then we don't have to tell them shvu. They could decide whenever they want to sit down. Ovel yom rishon asur lechol lechem mishlo. So that's the sudas havra that people bring bread. And where do we derive this from? Omar le rachmanol yechezkel velechem anoshim lo solchem. Don't eat from the bread of someone else, implying, because again, Yechezkel was being commanded not to provoke it, but implying that in the course of Avelis, then you have to eat the bread of someone else, not your own bread, and that's the Sudas Havra. Rabbi Yosef Mechalfe Sudasai Ladodi. I would love to spend an entire year on this one line tomorrow if we weren't learning Daf Yomi. Rabbi and Rav Yosef would swap meals. What does that mean? They were committed. Rabbi would send a meal over to Rav Yosef when Rav Yosef was in Ovel, and vice versa. And l'chora, this appella, because the whole idea of Tzudas Havra is that you eat from someone else's food. And now if you're swapping meals, and it's commitment, quid pro quo, you offer me your meal, and I'll offer the meal. But this has to be understood in light of the Gemara Megillah about Matanos about Mishloach Manos. When the Gemara reports that they used to swap food. Yomar Rabbi Yehuda, Omar Rav, Meis Ba'ir, Pile Plan. One person dies in the city, Kol B'nei Ha'ir Asurim B'asiyas Malach. We shut down the entire city. I guess this would be Jewish Lives Matter. close the entire city. He came to Dermos. Shama Kol Shipura the Shichva. He heard the shofar blowing. He thought that they were notifying the people, like the Pashkavilla today, that somebody died. But Chazal in Shidduch Avdi Avidito, he saw people were still going to work. They heard the same shofar. They're not allowed to go to work. It's Masechet Be'ir. Amalahu Lehevi Hanach Inshi B'Sham. I want to put these people into Nidur. Lo Shechva Ika B'Masa. He asked them a rhetorical question. Did you not hear that somebody died in town? Amrulei, and this is the source for what we call a Chevra Kadisha of Lansman. Chaburasa Ika B'Masa. Each section or neighborhood in the city has its own chevra, its own society, its own burial society. So he immediately rescinded the need. So it comes out that if you have that the whole nature or agenda of Isa Malach is to make sure that you take care of the burial. But if it's in a different part of the city and that they have their own Chevra Kadisha, then here we don't have to be inhibited about doing malacha because we're not going to be involved in the burial. If he exaggerates his bechi, his weeping, his mourning, he goes over. The Rambam has a whole discussion about this, where he says that everything has to be lefi midah, lefi mishkal. If you bury the dead in total silence, that's not acceptable. And if you go wild in bechi and so forth, that's not acceptable. Al mes acher hu boche. Oh, what's the punishment for exaggerating avelus and crying too much? Nebuch, you're gonna lose a close relative. You'll have to mourn again. One mourning leads to another mourning. Make sure you spell the word mourning correctly. Harsh punishment for exaggerating avil. I'll tell you the truth. I think what the Gemara means, again, please don't quote me on this, is that if you exaggerate the avilus, it's almost like fira. You're like saying to God, this is unacceptable. I can't go on in life. And the Avelim are obligated in the chiyuv of tziduk adin. The Lord is righteous. Again, it's hard for me to read the next Gemara. Very hard. Rabbi, would you mind reading? It's just terrible. My heart falls apart when I read. Sometimes the Agadah is so harsh. If you take it literally. She lost one of her 7 sons. She was crying and weeping excessively. I don't blame her. This is not acceptable. You're exaggerating your avelus and your beth. She doesn't pay attention. He warns her. You better listen to me. That's okay. But if you again insist on exaggerating avelus, then sovis zavdita le'idoch. You will have to prepare shrouds for another one of your children. Yes. She didn't pay attention, she didn't accept a warning, and another one of her children died. Ultimately, Mesuku, they all died because of her, the mother's excessive crying and mourning. Again, I don't know why they have to die, but that's the onus that you get for this. If you don't desist from this over-exaggerating mourning, then you might as well prepare your own tachrich. Umisan shita. Pasuk says in Yirmiyahu Navi, "B'cho al tivku lemes, val tagulo b'bachu bachu laholach, ki lo yoshiv od v'ra as Eretz Moladet. Do not cry for the deceased and do not shake your head for him. Al tifkul emes Yosef v'tah. Al tanudu lo Yosef. Ketzad, what is the proper measured avelus? Shloshi yom lebech. As we said over and over again, the first 3 days of avelus are critical. That's why in terms of bittul, regel mevatel, you had to have a kima avelus of 3 days. Shiva, then the balance, 4 days beyond the 3, lehesped. Shloshim, legiyutz, uletisporas. A mourner is forbidden to cut his hair for at least 30 days. Okay, that's what we know. Mikan v'elech. After the 30 days, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God declares, Iatem rachmanim bo yosem imeni. Don't be more compassionate towards the deceased than I am. No, don't over-exaggerate with such compassion. You're a failus. Oh, now this seems to support my theory. He says in the note here that if God took a person's life, that person was surely deserving of death. It's inappropriate, therefore, to mourn to an excess. Now the Gemara is darshaning the pasuk in a whole different way. Same pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda, who do I cry for? Laholech, someone who leaves this world below Banim, without any children. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, lo azla be'avla el lamandi yosef lo, he would never visit a base avel except for someone who died without children. B'chsiv, o, b'chu b'cho laholech, ki lo yashuv od, v'ra es eretz moladet. Same pasuk, it says, cry intensely for one who leaves. What does it mean, leaves? He leaves, he departs this world because he will not return again. It means he has no children. But the pasuk is not referring to crying on behalf of someone who died without children. No. The pasuk is referring to Zeh Shavar Avera V'Shanaba. He repeats the Avera over and over again. And he'll be punished severely. You might as well cry for such a person. Rav Huna l'tamei, the Omer Rav Huna, Kevin Cha'avra Adam, Avera V'Shanaba, a person repeats the same Avera, Hutrala. He convinces himself that it's permissible. Hutrala Salkadaitach Ela Ema, Nases Lo Kehet. He got so used to doing the Avera time after time, that it becomes like a head. He thinks it's okay. It's very dangerous because if the family suffered a bereavement, then all the surviving members of the family are in danger of being stricken. And therefore, he should view himself ke'ilu cherev munachas lo bein shtei yirei chosov. Imagine there's a sword here that's threatening to kill him. And that's for the first 3 days. Now, what about the balance of Shiva? It's a little less dangerous. Mishlosha ad Shiva, ke'ilu munachas lo kenegdo b'karen tzavos. It's like the sword is lying in a corner of a building, of the house. And after Shlosha, after Shiva, before the end of Shloshim, it's Ke'ilu Overes Kenegdu B'Shuk. It's as if the sword is passing in front of him on the street. Then we saw, the Mishnah says, Shal Noshim Li'olam Mipnei HaKavod. We don't place the coffin of a woman publicly in the shuk because of COVID, as we discussed before, the blood that comes out. Amri Nardoi Lo Shanu, and here we turn to Daf Chav Ches, Ela Chaya. Shar Noshim Meinichim. So a Chaya is a woman who died during childbirth. and blood is going to flow from her corpse, and that's a busha. But no woman should be set down after she dies in the public area. Tsiv vatamas sham mirim vatikover sham, which means that samach lemisa kvura. She died and they buried her immediately. They didn't delay the burial of Miriam by setting her down somewhere in the public. And even though she didn't die during childbirth, nevertheless, we don't set down a woman in public. So this is where we'll stop for today on the very top of Daf Chaf Ches. Wish you a great day.